Give a special welcome to all of you who are joining us online this morning. We're glad to have you. 104 of our teenagers getting on a bus right now are getting ready to get on a bus right now, so things are not as normal here, and a lot of our parents and members are down seeing them off at this time. I think that the discussion that we have for this morning is one of the more practical and important topics that we have to talk about today on so many different levels. And we're going to be camped out on it a little while. And some of it is going to be a little bit repetitive, but I think that it is important enough that it bears repeating. One of the great challenges that the world has in interpersonal relationships has to do with how we handle disagreements and how we handle things that we consider to be slights against us or outright hurtful things against us. And if Don Gray were here, he would tell you this morning that a large part of his counseling sessions have to do with this topic and the effect of either being able to forgive or unable to forgive. So our text comes from Matthew 18, and Peter comes to Jesus and says, "Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? Should I forgive them as many as 7 times?" And that's a rather commendable statement for Peter, because Peter knows that 7 is not just a number, it has significance. It is a perfect number. And Jesus responds, no, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Completion times completion. Last week, if you were here, we showed the little clip from The Chosen, where the people who are writing that series of videos creates a storyline around this. You know, Peter didn't just come up to Jesus and said, "Jesus, how many times do I have to forgive somebody?" That wasn't out of the blue. There was something behind that. There was some reason for him to do that. And Matthew just didn't take the time to tell us what it is. And so we don't know exactly what it is. But the people of the video series The Chosen did a great job in creating a storyline around that gave it real meaning and real application. And if you haven't seen that, I recommend it. It's really, really very powerful. I want to start off this morning with a little bit of the negative look at this. What happens when we are unwilling, unable to forgive? And then we'll get into the more proactive approach to it, the more practical things that we can consider to look at. And please interrupt me at any time. We do ask that you use the mic because we do have an online audience and they want to hear what you have to say also. So we're happy to have your participation in it. In fact, we covet that. We look forward to that. So some of the bitter fruit of our unwillingness or inability to forgive those things that we consider to be a slight against us, or that are outright harmful to us, that are wrong, that people do to us. And the emotional consequences, and we won't dwell on all of these. I'm just going to pretty well go through them as a list. And you can fill in the blanks as you have remembrances from your own experiences. But there are, of course, obviously emotional consequences. People who are always angry, people who are always negative and upset and resentful, quite often, if we really got to the root of it, we would find that at the bottom of that was carrying a grudge that they simply would not or could not forgive. Creates a very bitter attitude. There are psychological consequences. It increases the stress level. It contributes to depression and anxiety. It can create obsessive thoughts because we are holding to and being controlled by our unwillingness, inability to forgive. Physical consequences, it can create health problems. Actually, things that are measurable as a health issue, high blood pressure, weakened immune system, increased risk of heart disease, it can keep you awake at night, and failure to get restful sleep adds a whole nother dimension to the physical aspect of it. There are social consequences. Relationships are broken and social isolation can occur. Friendships can be dissolved and never restored. And that brings with it its whole set of consequences. There are spiritual consequences. There's a lack of inner peace. There's moral and ethical dissonance, inner conflict, a sense of guilt or shame. There are cognitive, mental consequences, a lens of negativity and distrust, reduced flexibility, inability to adapt to new situations or perspectives. And just the overall well-being of our daily lives, reduced quality of life, inability to grow in spirituality, to grow personally, is hindered by carrying the bitter fruit of an unforgiving heart. I expect that all of us here have either had some experience with that personally, or you know somebody, perhaps someone in your close family, who demonstrates all of those negative characteristics. I know I certainly do. And if we took the time, we could probably tell stories about that. Before we move forward from this, is there anything that anybody would like to add or modify or talk about on any of that? Well, let's make the transition with a song that I found that speaks to this, I think, quite well. So, I guess a good place to begin is with definitions. What do we mean when we say to forgive? You're usually our lead guy.
I think that we need to understand that forgiveness has to be an attitude where we're not going to hold things against somebody. We're not going to try to remember all of things obsessively. I'm not saying you can necessarily forget something, but you don't have to hold the anger in your heart. You don't have to hold resentment. You need to let all of that go and try to have a relationship as it was before whatever happened, as much as you can.
Lisa, did you want to add anything?
I'm sorry?
Who else?
One of the best and worst experiences I ever had with needing to forgive had to do with a very loving friend of ours who converted my mom, and as a result, my sister and I were small children at the time, and as a result later, my sister and I became Christians. But without going into the details of what happened, there was a point in my life where this friend of mine and I had a very strong disagreement, to the point where she called me in front of the elders for a private meeting. It was extremely uncomfortable and frustrating because I didn't think I was in the wrong. It was a matter of opinion of how I was caring for my mom at the time, and even some of the elders' wives thought that I was being grilled about something that was not wrong. And it was very painful, extremely painful. Years later, this person and we got back together, and somehow our relationship evolved to where we became extremely close again. And she, to me, was the most loving person I have ever met, and that is, experiencing all the grief and the pain there in the middle of a very trying relationship with my mom being terminally ill too. But anyway, at the end of my mom's life, this friend told me how she commended me on how I did take care of my mom, and we made amends there and later became very close again. And I ended up at the end of this friend's life doing what I could to help her, and it was just, I don't know if I'm doing a very good job of communicating how much love there was between us, but she gave me the opportunity to grow and show how much I loved her. And when I think back about the painful situation, it's as if we were two different people then, and it really, I don't think that really has a big impact on a negative impact on my life. Now, my focus is more on how much we loved each other and encouraged each other.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. Would you say there was an identifiable point in time when you forgave, or was it more of a gradual thing?
It was more gradual. I know she came and was very encouraging just a couple of months after the meeting with the elders, because she saw how much I was
So there was a sort of an asking for forgiveness, whether it was specific or not.
Yeah. In fact, probably a week after we met with the elders, I decided I felt very uncomfortable being part of that church. So I ended up going to another church. It was a Church of Christ, just in a different location. She had a fear that I was gonna reject God altogether, and she apologized that night when she thought that I was just going to leave church completely. But yeah, it was even then when she apologized, there was a lack of trust for me. because I saw how judgmental she was, and I wasn't comfortable opening up with her and sharing much of anything that I thought she might disagree with.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Go ahead, Patty.
Forgiveness is let go and live your life. Live Jesus in your heart. Trust God to give you what you need. Because God can give us peace. He can give us a quality life. He can give us personal growth. He can give us the fruits of the Spirit: gentleness, peace, comfort, hope, faith, love, confidence, joy, happiness, and victory. Today is a new day. Victory in Jesus, and also being an example of Jesus.
Good. Thank you.
You had a question about whether forgiveness was instantaneous or gradual. And I had a serious problem with a family member, and one wise elder instructed me that if I said, "How can I forgive?" And he said, "Just tell God that you forgive, and He will bring what is needed to help you do it."
Cool. I had another hand back here, I thought.
I was thinking about forgiveness today, and forgiveness to me, it means, as a Christian, my first thought is, that's what God said. If you don't forgive those, our family, our people in this world, then He won't forgive us. So that's the first thing I think about. And so is it instant or not? I said, well, regardless how painful it is, the word is the word truth. And the truth of the matter is, I must forgive. I must endure pain. I must suffer. And I must love. So for me, it's painful. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
I think about Peter. That was hard for him because he was hurt by an individual. So, to me, it means to endure pain, to surrender your desire for the common good of the family, Christian family, physical family. But it is hard. It's not as easy as one would think. Although I did, and I'll ask for forgiveness, it takes time for that pain to subside and, and have that kind of, I love, but it's painful still.
Yes, ma'am. Very true. And we're going to go over that over and over again. Anybody else?
One of the things that gets in the way, I think, of our forgiveness is that we don't forget. And so I don't know how many times I've asked myself, have I forgiven that person because I still feel it? We've heard about the feeling and everything. And so as part of a definition, I've got to think of the interaction we have once we've forgiven. There are those we hear of all the time that turn their back on their family or turn their back on people they know, and they walk away from them and never interact with them again. I think we see forgiveness because even when we're hurt and in our hearts we talk to God and we say we forgive them, maybe we tell the person we've forgiven them, but we remember it. But when we can interact with them and almost put on a false, I want to call it a false face almost, that we're still with you, we're still family, we're still sharing meals, we're still interacting with love towards each other. And just recently I was up with my family in New Mexico, and my cousin has a neighbor that lives right next door that absolutely 3 and 5 years ago just blasted them, accused them, even called and reported them for abuse to their children, did everything. And he came from next door. We were having our 4th of July party, and he sat down and talked. And I told my wife, I said, something has transpired there because of all the hate that went back and forth. Something, now I don't know what it was necessarily, but they are interacting with each other. They still know politically they disagree with each other and things like that. But they're interacting with each other, and they're showing love towards each other, even though they still remember the pain that each of them caused and that he caused them. So forgiveness is something that I think you can see.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
God will watch over us, and God, don't worry about the future, because God is under control by watching the future and all of this stuff. And don't worry about like what brings on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. God's under control.
Today's enough, isn't it?
Today should happen 1 week.
There you go. Thank you, Jeff.
I think forgiveness is also just acknowledging that we're all sinners and we all fall short of the glory of God. So he won't forgive us if we don't forgive, because we have to realize everyone sins. And for us not to forgive is not realizing that we all do bad things. We all treat each other bad. It's God's showing the heart of Jesus that we have to forgive everyone, whether it's hard. It is hard.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that we can all agree on is forgiveness is not easy. Probably one of the hardest things we'll ever be called on to do. And the closer that we are to the people who have aggrieved us, family, close friends, the more difficult it becomes. No one's saying that anything about this is easy. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and you continue to do so. The mic is right here. You interrupt me at any time. It's just fine. A lot of what we have to go over will be repetitive to things that you have said and things that you know, but it's important, and I think it's worthwhile for us to re-emphasize these things and to look at them from as many different perspectives as we can. So what is forgiveness? I think it is the fact that if we look at our concordance, if you all remember what a concordance is, or if you go to your website and do a search on forgive or forgiveness, you'll find at least 278 verses in the Bible that address this. What does that say? That says it's important. It says take notice, pay attention. I'm trying to tell you something that's important. If you look at Strong's definition of it, the word itself, and if you're doing a word study from a Greek Hebrew point of view, it is to show favor to, it is to pardon, it is to forgive, it is to show kindness. Now, that's not always the way that we think of forgiveness, I don't think. The idea of the showing kindness and showing favor, that's not what we typically associate with forgiveness. But in the context of the first century and the biblical writers, there is that connotation, that is that application as well. Another definition, forgiveness is the intentional and voluntary process by which a victim undergoes a change in feelings and attitude regarding an offense. Lets go of negative emotions such as revenge with an increased ability to wish the offender well. What is the definition of agape love? Acting on behalf of the other person's best interests, right? The other person's best interest. That is the 1 Corinthians 13 love. That is the love of God. That is the love where we have all of the commands to love one another. There's some pretty strong statements in there. And it's, again, no one's saying that it's easy, but it is necessary. Another definition, forgiveness is the process of consciously deciding, the emphasis here on personal choice, making a decision, a personal choice, to let go of feelings of resentment, anger, or vengeance towards someone who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness. I think that's what where it really gets difficult. That person does not deserve to be forgiven. And that's not an opinion, it's a fact. It's an absolute, incontrovertible fact. They don't forgive it, don't deserve it. And forgiveness is doing it anyway. It involves acknowledging the hurt. You don't deny it. Allowing oneself to feel the emotions associated with the hurt. And then choosing to move past those emotions to achieve a sense of peace and emotional healing. And the emphasis here again is that it is a choice. It is a exercising of our God-given right to decide, to choose. Forgiveness does not necessarily mean forgetting the wrongdoing or condoning it. Rather, it is about freeing oneself from the negative emotions that can arise from holding on to past grievances. We'll say this several times, but forgiveness is a very selfish act. It is what you do for yourself because it's what yourself needs. Forgiveness is the intentional and voluntary process by which a person who has been wronged or hurt undergoes a change in feelings and attitude regarding the offender. It involves letting go of negative emotions such as resentment, bitterness, and desire for revenge. Is that easy? No, it's not easy. Is it healthy? Absolutely. Instead, the person chooses to release these feelings and may even extend compassion, empathy, and understanding toward the offender. May. And I emphasize the word may. Also, may not. Some of the key aspects of forgiveness include a conscious decision to move past the hurt and anger. You have to decide that this is within your power to do, it's within your right to do, and then act accordingly. It involves an emotional release, letting go of negative emotions. It is not saying that you condone what has been done. It is not excusing what has been done. It is not saying it was okay. But it is a healing process, and it gives peace. It's an emotional healing for you. Reconciliation, maybe. but not required. Again, forgiveness is not something that you do because somebody asks you. It would be nice if they ask you, but they may never. So that's not a criteria. Again, it's a very selfish thing. It's something you do for yourself. It's a gift to the other person, but it's for you. A few quotes from people that some of you may recognize. Charles Stanley, a pretty well-known preacher, says, "Forgiveness is the act of setting someone free from an obligation resulting from a wrong done against you." Setting someone free from that. No longer expecting it. No longer waiting for ask for forgiveness. No longer waiting for someone else to try to correct a wrong. Mark Twain said, "Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it." I love that. Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. Isn't that a beautiful metaphor? Of course, the one that we all know from Alexander Pope, "To her is human, to forgive is divine." And I think some of you have made reference to this, is that forgiveness is not all dependent upon your own power. You have a greater power. You have the power of divinity. You have the power of the Holy Spirit to come alongside you and help you in that process. Bernard Meltzer said, "When you forgive, you in no way change the past, but you sure do change the future." If you don't forgive, what happens to the future? It doesn't change. It continues to be all those negative things that we talked about in the beginning of the class. Mahatma Gandhi, "The weak can never forgive. Forgiveness is the attribute of the strong." You believe that? It takes strength to do that, doesn't it? That's not an easy thing to do. C.S. Lewis, "I think that if God forgives us, we must forgive ourselves. Otherwise, it is almost like setting up ourselves as a higher tribunal than Him. To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." It's kind of an interesting thought that if we are unwilling to forgive, then we're setting up ourselves in kind of an abstract way of saying that we're at a higher place than God. Randall Worley says, "Forgiveness is not emotion, it's a decision." And if we wait for the emotion to do it, we'll never do it because the emotion is too strong. Sharon Alder says, "Forgiveness is the one gift you don't give to others. Rather, it is the gift you give so you can finally be free." It's one of the real challenges in hurt relationships and hurt feelings and in actual harm done by someone else is we have this tendency, we want them to ask for forgiveness. And if we wait for that, we may wait a lifetime. It may not happen. Some things that forgiveness is not, and again, this is somewhat repetitive, but it bears repeating. It is not condoning. Failing to see the action is wrong and in need of forgiveness. Not part of it. It's not excusing. It doesn't say, well, it was really all right for them to do that. No, it wasn't. There was nothing right about it. It was wrong, pure and simple. It'll be wrong after you excuse them, after you forgive them. It's not pardoning. Pardon is something that judges grant. Pardon is something that is a civil court. That's not what we're doing. We're not pardoning them. It's not even forgetting. And some of you have mentioned forgetting. Removing awareness of the offense from the consciousness. Truth be told, it's not going to happen. You're not going to forget it. And if you base your criteria for forgiveness on the ability to forget, then you're going to be severely disappointed because it's not going to happen. The remembrance is there. It's how that remembrance affects you that changes. And unfortunately, it's not reconciliation. Now, in Bladinka's case, there was a reconciliation, and that's beautiful and that's wonderful. And when that happens, that's a serendipity. That's a great thing. That's a good thing. But that's not the driving force, and it may never happen. And there's no reason not to forget. Forgiveness is granted without any expectation of restorative justice. We don't do it because we have to be reunited with this person, because that may not happen. And forgiveness is granted without any response on the part of the offender. It's not dependent on somebody asking you for forgiveness. It's not dependent upon them wanting it or not wanting it. It may not even be possible for them to be aware of your forgiveness. It's possible that the person may already be dead. And yet, if you're still holding that grudge against that person, it's still an acid that's doing more damage to the container. Well, we're going to start this, but we're not going to get through with this part of it today, and we'll pick it up again next week, Lord willing. But I came across this by a lady named Linda Andrews, and it's not hers particularly. She just organized it. She's pulled this from many different resources, and she gives credit to them. But these are some strategies, some practical things that we can think about as we begin to wrestle with forgiving people. She says number one is to lay the groundwork. Take time to explore and face your anger. How has it affected you mentally and physically? Can you name it? Can you give it a name, words? Can you articulate what it is exactly that needs your forgiveness? What has happened to you? What has been done? Not just some vague feeling of, hey, that wasn't right. Give it a name. Write it on a Post-it if you need to, or in your journal. Say, this is the problem. This is what I'm dealing with specifically. Don't feel like you have to rush the process. It doesn't have to happen today. It doesn't have to be completed today, and it won't be probably. If you try to force it, you'll just end up feeling pressured and feeling perhaps guilty if you're not able to do it on that time frame. Doesn't happen then. Set your intention to forgive and then do it at your own pace, knowing it might take days, might take weeks, months, years. Years is not a good thing because of what it does to you. Sooner is better than later. but later is better than not at all. Well, that's 2 of 7, and we'll pick up that, and then we've got a great deal more that we want to talk about on this because, as I said in the introduction, this is one of the most practical things that we can talk about as far as your personal well-being today, right now, here and now. And I think that it's something that all of us have in our lives. We have people who offend us. Sometimes it may be petty. Sometimes it may be extremely severe. And we need to wrestle with this and find ways that we take control of it instead of it having control of us. Thank you for your comments and for your sharing and for being here, and have a wonderful, safe, God bless week.